Hey there, folks. This is Jay Frost speaking to you, somewhat speaking to you from the Command Central at the Philanthropy Mastermind series. And I am so happy to welcome you here today. We've got a lot of people in the room and a lot of people who are going to be on the stage with me in a moment. But I want to welcome you here first and encourage you to do what some of your friends are already doing, and that's to say howdy or hello or konnichiwa or aloha or whatever you want to say over in the chat. You can do that probably along the bottom part of your screen. Please do use that as a space to play. We really do want you to participate in this conversation today. This is, after all, the after party or the APRA PD after party. If you don't know what that means, of course, we're talking about APRA, the association, which is really for the prospect development and prospect research community, a number of communities that I view as the kind of the brain trust in development. And a lot of folks went to the conference in Seattle. Perhaps you did, maybe you didn't. That's one of the things I'll ask you about in the chat in a second. But right now, just say hi. That's really a great way for those who are joining us on the panel today to know that you're here, see some old friends, and engage in the conversation as much as they can between talking with me and one another, and then also being able to view the chat out of the side of their peripheral vision. I also want to make sure before we jump in here today to do a couple of thank yous. One thank you is, of course, to our sponsor, DonorSearch. If it were not for them, we couldn't have any of these discussions, especially when we have as many people as we do today, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people live with us, and we're going to have others join us. And then in addition, of course, you can learn all about their work as well as the rest of the Mastermind series over on their site, which is at donorsearch.net. And under the resources tab is where you can find links to all of the Mastermind's programs. That's also a place where you can learn a lot about your donors, but we won't be talking about that unless any of our panelists do. So if you want to learn more about that, you can right there. And you can also learn about it through a link to a recording of this session, which is coming to you via email. So if you're on the list for this, you'll be getting that. Please be on the lookout for it. It's also notable to mention that DonorSearch is a prominent sponsor of APRA. They're not the only ones. Vendors and donors to APRA, including foundation donors, as I am, and perhaps some of you are critical to the success of that association and the others in the field of philanthropy. So I want to do a shout out to all of those companies and individuals who are supporting our association and associations. So our thanks to DonorSearch, but also to all the others who make that conference possible. And then, of course, I want to say thank you to all the people who are here with me today. And I'm going to ask them to turn on their cameras and unmute themselves so they can say hello. And we'll just start with Stephanie because she was the first to do it. So hi, Stephanie. Do you mind just saying hello and introducing yourself?
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Stephanie Brower here. This is going to be weird to say, but I'm trying to tell people I'm going to be Stephanie Willis in 10 days. I'm getting married, so don't forget about me.
Well,
So
congratulations.
I am a senior manager of prospect development for Creative Fundraising Advisors, a fundraising firm in Minnesota.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And let me see, I'm not sure who is next, but I'll start with Priska.
Hi, I'm Priska Zakaria, and I am the Executive Director of Prospect Development at the University of South Carolina. I was at the University of Georgia for more than 20 years, just recently made the transition, and I'm pleased to be here with you all guys. And most importantly, I'm a big fan of APRA.
Thank you, Priska. Let me see, Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Heininger. I'm president of the Eden Plus Fundraising Consulting based in Des Moines, Iowa. This was my first big APRA PD event this year. I've been to a lot of regional events, and it was really fun to see everyone all in one room.
Indeed. And it's fun to see everybody in this one room too. But yes, it's different. Seattle was different, right? Susan.
Hey, I'm Susan Quinn. I'm the Executive Director of Advancement Services in a small private university in Western North Carolina called Lenore Rhine. And I've had many years in nonprofit and higher ed operations and worked in places like UC San Diego and also the Alzheimer's Associations.
Excellent. And then last but not least, Elise.
Hi there. This is Elise Lynch, and I have been with Kaleidoscope as their executive vice president and kind of chief cook and bottle washer for a while. We were previously with 10K Wizard many, many years ago, and many of you might remember that product.
Mhm.
And, you know, so we've been supporting universities and nonprofits for many years in trying to uncover the wealth and relationship information in SEC filings. So that's kind of what we do. That's our niche, as you think. We went to Seattle this year. This is our second APRA big PD invitation, our event that we've been to, but we've been to many of the regional ones, and we support many of the regional chapters as well. So we're happy to be here with you today, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I didn't ask that really important question. Some of you answered it already, but we'll go ahead and do that review. But I'm going to ask the audience first, if you all don't mind, which is now I'm doing y'all too. So I do live in Virginia, but it's Northern Virginia. It doesn't really count, but I'm still going to pick that up. But in the chat, if you all wouldn't mind, let us know if you went to the conference, and if you did, and you can put this in the same note, which number conference this was for you. Like how many years you've gone, or how many times perhaps you've gone to APRA, the big APRA, let's call it. Just go ahead and tell us in the chat. That's kind of helpful to know as context. And we have some people who have been there their fifth time, and let me see, not Seattle, serious FOMO. Don't worry, Sarah, we're going to address that today. First conference for you, Carolyn. It's great. Alexis, your first conference. I did hear that, I guess, Eric, you were telling us that it was 376 out of the 1,200 people were new to the big APRA. Is that right?
Yeah, they posted the stats just before the keynote, which was wonderful to see. And then there were a whole host of folks who were joining virtually. So that number just is incredible to have everyone together and to be those peers in the prospect development field.
And Stephanie, you're nodding furiously. So I know you have inside intel on this. So can you give us a little?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was so, like Eric said, it was so amazing. For those who don't know, I chaired last year's conference in Indianapolis. And so this year, you never know if you go completely West Coast, how many, but yeah, 1,200 attendees, all of those new people. I think there was a really nice energy. And I also think it was a reminder to people who have been for a number of years to remember to break things down for newbies, acronyms. What does this mean? And I think, you know, I see others shaking their heads. It's really cool. This is our pipeline for future APRA success. I loved seeing everybody.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of data, but also definitions. And so I'd love to dive into that in a second, because there will be people in the room with us today who didn't benefit from all those descriptions, just like they didn't benefit from sessions. But before we go on to that, Priska, how many conferences was this for you?
18.
I think you deserve some kind of award for that.
I guess just my supervisors just don't dare say no to me.
Well, I wouldn't say no to you. I can tell right now, just like, you know, even the way you said that, you're convinced, but obviously you see a value in this. So why keep going back, and what makes it special? Why does it deserve 18 visits?
Well, it's just you get to a point where you focus more on continuing to build meaningful relationships and networking and negotiating in person with vendors. I found that to be extremely beneficial to do it in person. And just like Stephanie said, you know, to have finally the role of more of a mentor, someone that guides the new research and prospect development individuals that join the conference, it feels empowering. I remember the first time that I attended my first APRA conference, I told myself, this isn't for me. I don't know who these people are. There's 2,000 people that I might have absolutely nothing in common with in this big room. And here I am 22 years later into the industry, now wanting to be a big proponent and wanting to grow the future leaders in fundraising, and APRA has always been there for me. Another reason why I believe it's so important is because during our careers, we always experience challenges and moments where you feel demotivated. And if you don't have this community to be there for you, you're left with the work and the challenges that you experience in your own organization. And this has helped me so many times, the chapters, my friends and colleagues on the APRA, Georgia chapter, now South Carolina, you know, the Carolinas chapter. Is so important that you find those connections. And sometimes it's preventing, sometimes it's to build new processes and share your knowledge. I couldn't say enough good about APRA.
Well, somebody ought to take that snippet out and use it for promoting the next conference, to be sure. Okay, but not all of you have been doing this so religiously. So, Susan, I think this is your first big APRA, or was it?
No, actually, last year in Indianapolis was my first APRA. So I've been mostly active in the AASP Association for Advancement Services Professionals for most of my career. I always had this kind of maybe wrong-headed idea that, well, maybe it's probably actually correct, that AASP was this general kind of big tent for people like me, and APRA was over there where the experts were. So I didn't quite go over there. But I had an opportunity to go to APRA in Indianapolis, and Priska, I saw you present, and I was so impressed. Really, you presented on an amazing workflow structure that you had rolled out. And there were a group of us in the back who went and sat around a table and talked about your presentation afterwards. And it actually was a reason that I applied and spoke at APRA this year. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And that is really the reason I was able to come back, because it was making a presentation. And so I was able to leverage that with my organization. So.
And by the way, just a note, and perhaps Jack can even put this in the chat, I want to make sure that people have a link to APRA for those who don't currently belong and feel like checking that out. There are other conferences during the year, so don't have too much FOMO. We're going to discuss the key takeaways from this meeting, but there are other meetings throughout the year. There are also webinars, and there are chapters, which several of you have cited. So we should talk about that in a minute too. But I also want to mention AASP. So AASP, which you just referenced, Susan, is another really important association in this universe. And so I want to encourage people to take a look at that as well. So Jack just put the APRA link in the chat. So do take a look at that if you haven't already. Now let me see, what's maybe the next best place to go? Would just a show of hands if you presented at the conference this year? Okay, so it's universal among the people who are here. Oh, and we've got people also who are raising their hands in the audience. So thank you for that. I want to let you all know that if you're here in the room with us and you'd like to participate here on the stage, I'm going to welcome you up here in just a minute. Make sure you send a note to host and panelists so that Jack or I can bring you up here as soon as I have kind of a break in the conversation. So all of you have been presenters this year. I'm sure that there are key takeaways that you have, but I'd love to at least feature what you talked about. So I'm just going to do this visually. Elise, can you say what you addressed at the conference this year? Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I spoke about the knowledge barrier and the technology barrier that SEC.gov has, and why people don't use SEC filings that much for their information gathering about wealth, and how we've, as a company, determined that we needed to streamline that process and make an interface that is specific to insiders, so that they can gather that information, or it is already gathered for them, and with verification links back to the source documents. So they're not guessing, and there's not a range of information. It's an actual fact, as opposed to those kinds of things. We also calculate, the total wealth based on those pieces of information and holdings and that kind of thing. So what I found in going through this was most people, really the new generation of people who are doing prospect research, either don't use it because it's too complicated, or SEC filings, I mean, or they have this knowledge barrier. It takes too much time. There's a very small team, you know, those kinds of things. So in order to break that down a little bit, we're going to be doing some knowledge sharing and some just basics, fundamentals on SEC filings and what you can find in them in a series of webinars.
And for those who haven't dug into the filings themselves, it is a world of difference between that and getting the information aggregated through a vendor. And the vendors do wonderful work in pulling together, assembling bodies of data and giving us numbers, but it's helpful sometimes to be able to dig beneath that for those who haven't done it. So I can imagine that'll be a very helpful webinar. It's also important to note that that I don't know how many of the sessions have been recorded. Maybe Stephanie will be able to address that. But that's another way for people to gain access to some of these sessions. And maybe I know I just name checked you, Stephanie, but I want to turn to Eric because he's next on my visual cue here, and just ask Eric, what did you talk about this year? And you know, maybe a little bit about it in the same way that Elise shared about hers.
Sure. So I had 2 sessions this year, and it was very fun. So we did a pre-conference that was called Grandmother, Mother, Daughter, Mining Your Database for Meaningful Intergenerational Impact.
Oh,
It was fun because we talked a lot about some case studies and some engagement tactics, because it is not always obvious sort of who the decision makers are or how you might be able to take folks who have been long-term supporters and really think about what the next years look like. It may be appropriate or it may not be appropriate to look at some of these next generations. So that was really fun. The crowd in the room, it was a 3-hour workshop. We talked through every element you could imagine, but we had specifically titled it Grandmother, Mother, Daughter, because for so many, there's sort of an inherent bias towards some of the patriarchs who may be involved. And so we talked through that as well, and how you might think about engagement, and what that sort of transfer of wealth looks like, but also what wealth families may have had inside that. The other session that I did was called What Moves You? Utilizing Your Own Personal Moves Management to Enhance Your Career and Professional Next Steps. And this was targeted toward folks who are maybe a little more junior in their career or junior in the field as a whole. And to just think about all of the options that are out there. I think there's sort of the typical role that makes you think through, okay, I go from a researcher to an analyst to a AVP to a VP, but there are so many other things that are possible. And to just be intentional, you may realize that from your prospect research, you may fit very nicely into sort of a mid-sized organization as a director of development, or you might consider a role that would be in a consulting role. And this was a great session that we had done for Rocky Mountain, MoCan, and Great Plains. And Cassie, I believe, was my co-presenter for that one, who's in the room today. We did it again because it was so well received, because when you're thinking about your career in this, and the association's a great opportunity, there are so many options, but it was also about finding the right fit for you, whether it's about your values, whether it's about your skill set and what things you bring to the table that aren't necessarily the day-to-day software tools, but really, you know, how do you think creatively about what a process or a research project looks like. It just makes for a much more vibrant career. We all have jobs, but what does our career look like? And so it was so great to hear from some of the younger folks who are thinking about what this looks like. And I think that in prior years, it would have been hard to think about a career in this, but it really has turned into a true profession. So it was nice to see what that would look like. And if you are interested in slides for either of those, find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find, and I can share those with you.
And I'll make sure to ask everybody if you're willing to share how people can find out more about you and your work before we end today. So we'll put those in the chat as well, so people have those links. But thank you for that, because I would not have remembered to do it otherwise. Priska, how about you?
So I presented 2 sessions. One, it was I co-presented with my newly hired director of prospect strategy, Carolina Williams, and that was a meaningful contact report. So both my sessions, the other one was on shifting the percentage from 80% reactive to 20% reactive, and basically, embracing more of a proactive approach to research, which is a topic that has been discussed over and over, but are we actually doing it, right? So both sessions were collaborative sessions where the whole attendees participated and we learned from each other. I love those sessions. Actually, it was my first time doing the collaborative sessions. And of course, I'm very social, so I enjoyed the interactions and the immediacy, how topics surface when others provide their experience. I think it provides a little bit of a group therapy venue for everyone that participates. So I enjoyed that. Some people really provided suggestions on how to go about certain things, but I do think that both topics lended very well to collaborative efforts in communicating what are you experiencing, where you're at. The other thing I would like to say, when I present at APRA, sometimes it's humorous to me to know that I am going to act like an expert on a topic and show off, this is how we do it. I have to honestly say, what is the reality is that's how it should be done, right? So we present the way it should ideally be done. But then you go back to the office, it's like, I can't believe I presented on that because we're actually struggling with this very topic, right? So, meaningful contact report, it is a topic that a lot of us are revisiting right now. What are you measuring? I remember the old days when I just started with APRA, a lot of you guys, I would think, certainly you, Jay, know John Thurston. And in the early years of my career, one of his, I'm gonna quote him here, something that he said stuck with me. And it was, measure what you value and value what you measure. And ever since then, that comes to mind, even at a personal level. Is that important? Is what I'm doing today gonna matter, 2-3 years from now? Are we measuring just action or reactions of what actually is an impact or turn into an impact? So we started revisiting, what are we, having these development officers doing? Why do they have to measure? It was face-to-face. Yeah, but where'd you go with that? Was it impactful? Did you move that relationship? It goes beyond moves management, right? So we're implementing that right now at the University of South Carolina. I can't say it's a smooth ride. It's a big change. Change management probably needs to come before new implementation. So we're growing together as we are piloting this new process. But if you stop thinking for a second and you go back and look how it was done a long time ago, it was face-to-face. Then comes the pandemic and we discover that, hey, I made more visits and we had Zoom meetings and now there's text. We measured, text is fine. And so we are removing what was that visit, how was the vehicle of that visit. We track it as, the method, but it was the impact. So the meaningful contact is what we count, right? So it is not as new as some people think, but you'd be surprised how many people in that room said we're still doing the face-to-face. We still, are counting those as more important than the rest. So of course, the majority of you guys have experience. If you work for an organization that's the business school, the business alumni, like, please do not come visit me. I don't want to have another lunch. I can text you, or we're gonna do a quick Zoom call. So we are, the being donor centric. It's an impact that we want to make in this industry. So that triggered a lot of really good conversations. And of course, at this University of South Carolina, we have some pretty impressive dashboards that are very helpful with segmenting all these interactions. And for anyone here listening that might want to learn more later on, as we refine this process, we'll be able to share how this is going, but we just started. The other topic, of course, it's of relevance always, moving to a proactive effort, and I was somewhat surprised to hear how many people still have presidents and leadership that requires a full comprehensive profile, like, let's do this, traditional deep dive at any phase of fundraising. So we had good conversations about that. When it comes to proactive research, the proactive piece comes to fruition when you actually can see it from implementation, from discovery, all the way to gift. And so having been able to connect the identification of a prospect with the revenue committed for that prospect after it was identified by researchers. And when you see that you celebrate that identification because you feel like, I am like a development officer, I was part of that success, that's very empowering. And I often share, just think about it. You work in research 2-3 years, the shelf life of a researcher has changed from what it used to be way back when you would see people. I mean, there still are researchers that have been in the industry with the same organization for like 20-25 years. But there's a tendency now to want to upgrade, your financial position and your professional status, understandably so. And think of what you do with that. Think how you attract, Stephanie, you were talking about the new research professionals. And you're an organization that says, they come to your interview and they say, how are you going to measure my success? Think about that.
In fact, that's a perfect segue for you, Stephanie. How about you?
Well, I also wanted to anecdotally share something that was just mentioned. Karen Isbell, this is a little off topic, received the Visionary Award this year, and it's a huge honor and a huge congratulations. And I was listening to her speech, and she said she always had people in the industry, she would kind of whisper their names of, oh, that's this person. And I was floored because she is one of those people for me. And, to go to your point, I think we are always having a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I mean, kudos to presentations at APRA and et cetera. And so I think, it always helps me remember we've got to stay grounded to where we came from. A lot of us have been to a lot of conferences, and I think let's never lose that newbie experience. So with that, I did present a topic that I'm very passionate about lately is messy data. And that's basically what the title was. And so I had a case study where I partnered with the Lincoln Center Theater to completely redo their database before they went to, they had a migration to a new software. And so it was a session that was open to all. It was live streamed and recorded. To answer your point, I tried to go see how many recorded sessions are available. There is a package that you can still buy attendees if you do have serious FOMO. There were, I want to say, 12 sessions. That might be too generous. So mine was one of those, but back to messy data, I tried to hit all size shops, all kinds of shops, all different sectors, because I think what we're really struggling with seeing, and I was paying attention to the conference, AI, you can't really use AI if your data prevents you from it, and I think a lot of times, how do you really look to meet the deliverable results of your fundraising shop if you don't have the tools to be able to create pipelines, to be able to prospect, et cetera. And so it was maybe not the sexiest of topics. It was messy data, but I had a great audience and I've gotten a lot of great feedback. And again, I think it's all about basics. We've got to stick with the fundamentals sometimes before we can go to those new and exciting products. So yeah,
absolutely.
that was my experience.
And just before we move on, and I want to hear from you, Susan, I have in my closet cassette tapes of recordings from the sessions I delivered. So if somebody in the audience doesn't know what a cassette tape is, look at the Guardians of the Galaxy. And then if you're really interested, you can always hear ancient APRA episodes. Those were transcribed from papyrus directly onto cassette tapes.
There was a
Sus-
saying, APRA archives. That was kind of floating around. So maybe those could be in APRA archives. Yeah.
Yes, along with some of us. In fact, well, Priska mentioned John, and actually we served, John Thorson and I served on the board together. There's for those who are really interested in past stuff, because there were also past sessions that were interesting, not mine, but others. And on the Wayback Machine, which I'm sure everybody in the research community has used, you can go back and look at the APRA site about 10 years ago and see there was a history of APRA there, including all these different people who were served on the board and spoke at conferences and did different things, as well as who the billionaires were each of those years over APRA's history. So if, just for fun someday, if you're a little bored or tired of doing whatever you're doing, check out the Wayback Machine. So Susan, how about you?
Hey, so you were talking about imposter syndrome, and in many ways, my presentation was, in an unspoken way, dealing with some of that. I mentioned that Frisco was at last year's conference listening to your talk and came out and was drinking coffee with folks. And I always talk about small shops because in the last quarter of my career, that's where I've been. And so it was connecting with people there about their small shop experience. And there was a considerable amount of angst about very elaborate kind of methodologies or beautifully outfitted kind of workflows. And how do I scale that for my own purposes? And then kind of worrying about that a little bit. I had made a connection with the folks at Campbell and Company over in the exhibit hall, and we got to talking, and we thought it might be fun to field a survey. So we did a little leadership type of survey, sending it out to small shop practitioners, small and large shop, ask people to self-identify. And then we were able to compile some, it's not earth shattering, but it's interesting kind of attitudinal response to different challenges in the small shop. And there was a quote that came out of our work that seemed to epitomize where we were going with the talk. And the quote was that what we see in the small shop is a spirit of enoughness. And so the general thrust of the presentation was about lifting up the small shop experience and recognizing the high-level professionalism and excellence that can be there, but that the business models may look different. And one thing that we found was that in small shops, people, for instance, aren't necessarily tracking proposals, right? In most small shops, there isn't a person with the title prospect researcher. That role is shared by all kinds of people, typically the leader of the development team. We found a little bit about, that old saw about we all wear a lot of hats. One of the things about that really struck me was that all kinds of people do gift entry. As a head of executive advancement services, I was like, what? Development officers are doing gift entry? Really? That was interesting to me. And also that everybody on the team in a small shop, which out of our data, we decided meant about 15 people, including fundraisers or fewer. They all said they did stewardship, 100%. So that kind of gets to the idea of the closeness of the team to the actual impact of the work, and that how that can change the attitude or the kind of sense of what your culture is within your organization. Then there were two other main findings that we had that were really the core of the presentation. And one was that the 100% of everyone from small shop told us that they feel empowered to make their own decisions and solve problems, and that they feel heard, that they are able to talk to leadership in an influential way. And those from large shops did not respond in that way. They talked about maybe not having had access to a certain degree. And the other thing was that small shop folks understood that they were understaffed and under-resourced, but large shops seem to complain about that a little bit more than small shop folks. So, and we just had open conversation with the folks in our session about what their experience was like, and just trying to elevate the kind professional, the eclectic kind of tool set you have to have in order to survive in a small shop environment. And then recognizing that kind of eclectic skill set is precisely what can set you up. Again, talking about your career paths for greater leadership, because you can see that 360-degree view. You may be involved in stewardship. You may even understand how gift processing works. All those things come together to create a kind of holistic view. That's really an advantage to those who begin or are well-versed in the small shop world. And anyway, that's where I'm sitting right now. So I love thinking of it in those positive ways. I had some great feedback from the audience and encourage them to do things like volunteer in the local chapters, because networking, we were talking about here being so important, 18 years, Prisca, coming to APRA, those networks are really important. I'm just beginning to build mine inside the APRA community, but there's so much overlap with the ASP that I feel like I know a lot of people. Incredibly invaluable. And just that interest in reaching out and talking to people and not being afraid to throw a question up on a listserv or reach out and connect with somebody. I can't tell you how many times over the last 2 years I've been on Zoom calls with people I don't know, but I knew them through the organization because we shared an interest in something that had come out through some social media or something, and then we were able to compare notes. It was a very friendly community, so we just were trying to promote that and these wholesome, happy attitudes about the professionalism that can exist even on the smaller scale.
Well, it sounds like that may be bridging into our key takeaways. So I'm going to ask you all to do a couple of things that are nearly impossible in the 20 minutes that we have remaining. And the first thing is, if each of you who are on the screen right now would, if you feel comfortable doing so, go to the chat and say how people can, find out more about you or connect with you if you want to. Because to your point, Susan, I think that this is one of the things that we get from a conference that sometimes we don't get from our virtual environment. So if you're willing to do that, you can just put either a link to your LinkedIn or something else in the chat. Again, it's entirely up to you, but that way people could learn more about you. And what I'm also going to do at the same time as you're doing that is ask you to be thinking about, maybe in a 1 minute window, the 3 key takeaways that you got from this conference. And while you're doing that, writing and then thinking, I'm going to try, this is the ultimate multitasking experiment. I'm going to go and promote a couple of folks who are here to the stage so they can also join us to just say hello and then give us their 3 takeaways. And I'm going to start, if she's still here, with my friend and colleague, Sarah Tedesco. So hopefully Sarah will be joining us as a panelist. And here she comes. Sarah's, among other things, the CEO of Donor Search, but you probably saw her hanging out at the conference. It's not her first time there. I don't know which numbered conference this was for you, Sarah. Maybe you can start by just telling us that.
Yeah, I think it's probably around 15. Not as many as Priscilla, but we're getting there. But yeah.
So yeah, that's a good number of conferences, though. I think you're both up there toward the top. I want to make sure that if there's anybody else who wants to be brought up onto the stage, that we do it. So in the off chance that I have missed your name, I would like you to go again to the hosts and panelists and just say, yes, promote me. And then you will give me infinite power to make you join the panel here. That's about the extent of my powers, but I'm happy to exercise it. And so what I'm going to do now is just do a round robin and ask each of you for your key takeaways. And if you don't mind, actually, I'll start with you, Sarah, because I know you're going to be hopping off to something else in a second. So what were your key takeaways from the conference?
Yeah, I think somebody else, I think it was Elaine who mentioned it in the chat, the energy was just so positive. It was great. Last year, I don't know, it was a little bit different vibe, but this year everybody seemed really engaged. People seemed excited to be in Seattle, and everybody seemed really excited to network with each other. Also, I thought Karen, she's amazing. She's done so many wonderful things. And I loved that comment about imposter syndrome. You constantly keep working to achieve and keep going, keep moving forward. So it's important to kind of step back and say, okay, here we are, and look at this new next sort of movement that's coming through. And that was another comment I wanted to share, is that there's a lot of new faces. There's a lot of new sort of folks that had started, you know, maybe 10 years ago and are now presenting and doing these really innovative presentations and thought leadership at the conference. And then the last comment I'll share is that, you know, we provide, you know, these donor search AI solutions, and there was a lot of conversation about it. There were actually some really wonderful partners and clients of ours that were presenting. World Vision was one of them, Shriners Hospital was one of them, and that was really cool because we got to see people sort of overcoming this fear of the big data and this new technology, and how do we implement it within our organization and see the effects of it. So that was really, that was exciting for us. That was really great. And of course, all the happy hours, you know, there were so many fun parties and so many great conversations that we had a blast. So
Yeah, we
thanks.
can't really have a party online. So that's one thing that we've discovered over the last 4 years. Well, maybe
We
a
tried.
little, but
Yeah.
we tried. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
also want to make sure we note Elaine, Liz, and Nicole, who have all just joined us. So I'm going to hold you all for just a second. Please stay there for a second. I'm going to go back to Eric, and can you give us your key takeaways, Eric?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it is mentorship. I think that when we look around the room, whether it is the mentor or the mentee, you are never too old to be a mentee, and never too young to be a mentor. And I think as we think about career development, as we think about the development of our technical skills, as we think about our careers and our ability to make a difference in our community, it really comes down to that. And so if you have a chance, thank a mentor, go find a mentee. But this is my call to action that says, we are not in this alone. And so please be a great part of our community and find that person who may need to be in this room today and invite them.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's great advice. Thank you, Eric. Elise, how about you? Oh, you're on mute.
That was very eloquently put, Eric. I enjoyed that a lot, because what we found is sharing knowledge was critically important to not only cross-training people in a small shop, but also providing that more in-depth knowledge to help people go farther in the research that they're doing. And it just, as an educator, I feel like you never get too old to learn something new every day. And if you're not learning something new every day, you're getting old. That's what makes you old. So we enjoyed it a lot, and we found that people were very receptive to enjoy and learning more and being able to share their ideas about what they'd like to see in products. So yes, it was wonderful. We enjoyed it.
Thank you. Let me see. I'm losing track of who I've said. Priska, would you share your key takeaway?
Yeah, I was more thinking about, you know, the industry now being in this sort of a phase. That's what I got out of the conference more so than other times, is we're in a phase of almost introspection and rediscovery. And I figure out that, you know, all the metrics, all the well screenings and everything, I mean, we're in a phase now that really organizations are concentrating on what really aligns with their donor base and what really matters. So there's so much technology and the visualization and AI, and yet there is this need for only being more selective on what we do, which, you know, I appreciate quality. That's something that I took away. And then the other thing is the rise of the due diligence expectations now, you know, and mostly it's learning from past mistakes. I was pleased to hear, at least in 2 sessions, utilizing very widely advertised and published examples of what happened. I was very familiar with one of them. And you know what happens, the misalignments and the reputational damage that can happen. This is a conversation that long ago was not a thing, because, you know, the social media and everything that is out there. So that was my second point. And then, you know, just agreeing with everyone else and what they share is that, you know, we're now embracing this new wave of emerging generations that is not only generations of donors, is the generation of new prospect development experts. And APRA will be, helping with this. And I love, Eric said that the mentorship and being a mentee, we never end to learn.
Thank you for that. Susan, how about you?
Well, bouncing off that just a little bit, I think for me, the session that I enjoyed maybe the most was the APRA talks. And we had a great panel, and the theme was we're all data scientists. So we had heard conversation there about how to lean into that and some of the technical sides of how you might be able to get some training on coding or not to be afraid of it and jump into it. But the thing that I also took away from that was one of the panelists, I think it was Ann Pollock of the University of New Mexico Foundation, she has such a beautiful way of speaking in metaphor. And the thing that I loved about what she brought to that session that was meaningful to me was reminding us that, yes, we have all these technical skills and these insights, but part of our role is as translators or storytellers. She used some interesting language, like, when we're talking way down deep in the weeds, she called that cricket talk. And I've seen people, when I'm trying to tell them some detail of something, react to my cricket talk, right? So she was encouraging that we share our data almost like storytellers. She said, refine it, and I was an English major originally, so I'm thinking poetry, right? The beauty of deletion. And refine it in such a way that it can be easily understood and it still has to be truth, of course, but that's a challenge to us. We are kind of translators. We are people who turn something complex into something actionable. And to me, that was a great reminder and takeaway.
Thank you for that. Stephanie. Now, before we go on to Elaine and Liz, Nicole, and Tim, who just joined us too. Hi there, Tim. Tim, by the way, has a terrific podcast. Everybody should sign up for that. So Tim, make sure to include that link in our chat if you would. But before we go on to this, you were the last year's conference chair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know you're going to give us some great takeaways, but you can also probably do a shout out to the people who organized this conference. And we haven't really tipped our hat to them. Would you mind doing the honor and acknowledging those people who organized this year's conference?
Absolutely. I can't speak enough for John Garrow. I mean, he did an amazing job. For those of you who don't know, there's a committee of about 15 volunteers who spend a year cultivating these sessions, getting feedback. I can't speak highly enough of that. The APRA staff, the APRA board, I'm thrilled to be coming in to the board, and all of the feedback, all of these matter. Good experiences, bad experiences, fill out those surveys, because the only way we can make conferences better in to come is to hear what everybody liked. So I couldn't echo the thank you and credit more, Jay. Yeah. Key takeaways. I mean, honestly, gosh, I have such eloquent panelists that I don't think I am actually I saw Dominic's chat reference, and that's really my thoughts and my takeaways. I'm so glad to hear, Dominic, you had amazing. I'm glad I got to meet you in real life, but I think I wrote down some things, due diligence, pipelines, but I think my main takeaway, honestly, is that we are all human coming to this conference, and we're all passionate about something. But I think we have to remember that we don't have to be the expert on every single thing in APRA or AASP. That's why you're presenting on a specific topic, but I think giving yourself the grace and understanding of what's right for you as a human in the situation, what volunteering looks for you, but what needs you are. If you came to the conference, you're like, that was so much, I didn't absorb everything. That's okay. There's materials. And so I think what I love about this community, and the biggest takeaway from the conference, is you can come be your authentic self, hopefully, and get the tools and resources, whatever it means to you in that moment. And your journey is going to look so different than everybody else's, but hopefully you came back with at least one positive experience and one thing that you'll try to implement. So it's very moving. And Dominic, you said it very, very beautifully, and panelists very articulate as well.
I didn't expect any pastoral counseling, but it was beautiful. And I think we all benefit from that. Thank you so much. And because Dominic did say this is Dominic Cordero, who we're name checking here. So I'll just take the liberty, Dominic, of reading your comment, which is that you had, again, an amazing time last week at the conference. As he says, my key takeaway is to be kind. There it goes. Is to be kind to yourself and accept successes and failures, and that other people are in the same boat and experiencing the same challenges. Thanks for all the great connections from last week. Absolutely. We do appreciate all of that. And before we go on and have our folks here who just joined us talk about their key takeaways, I want to encourage all of you to join us on Thursday for our next session in the series, in the Philanthropy Mastermind series. So if you don't know about the series, we moved to a 1 o'clock start time like we did today. So I hope you'll join us for that. If you want to learn more about it, you can under the resources tab at, again, donorsearch.net. And if you care about your donors, and I'm sure you do, you can learn a lot about them there as well. Now, the other thing is that I'm going to be taking off from here for England and conducting sessions over the next couple of weeks, starting next week, and with some really interesting people. So if you would think about joining us there, those will be at 11 a.m. Eastern time to make an adjustment for time. And we'll have interesting people from English National Opera and a whole bunch of other organizations all over the next 2 weeks. So I hope you'll join us for some of those conversations. So with that, I want to jump on to, let me see. Actually, I'm going to start with you, Tim, because you said you wanted to talk about something that Eric had mentioned earlier. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Jay, and thank you to this fantastic panel.
Yes.
You've all shared some great feedback. It's been really worthwhile today. Eric, I really liked your comment about it's never too late to be a mentor. And for me, that resonated with, I was really privileged to be a co-facilitator for the executive leadership cohort, which was a half day before the full PD conference. First of all, I want to make a big plug. If you manage teams or if you yourself would find value in that program, please, when you register for PD next year, there's a section on your registration form to apply for ELC. And I want to echo other people's comments about the energy in the room and the networking opportunities. With ELC, I got the sense that it's never too late to be a leader with the executive leadership cohort. We had people who are new to managing teams, but they've been a leader on a chapter committee, or they're the chapter president. So leadership looks different in various ways. And I think just giving our community the space to expand the definition of what it is to be a leader is really helpful. And it's so great that we had so many first-time attendees who themselves can grow into leadership as well, and will have perhaps more comfortability thinking of themselves as an emerging leader, if it is like, well, you are leading a chapter or you're leading projects. Maybe you don't have the title, but you yourself are capable of leadership qualities. So just one of my takeaways.
Thank you, Tim. Liz, how about you?
Hi, thank you. I'll say for myself, key takeaways. My first time attending APRA PD was in 2022 in Atlanta. And on my first day at the conference, I met someone who is now my beloved mentor. And so it's been mentioned several times throughout this panel that mentors come in all shapes and forms and can drop from the sky, or they can be assigned to you. So however you find a mentor, please do reach out, especially if you're in a small shop or if you feel kind of isolated. If there's not a lot of APRA chapter presence where you are, reach out. This is such an incredible community, and I have consistently found year after year that people who are members of APRA are so giving of their time. They are so generous. They will connect with you on LinkedIn. They will reach out. They will Teams you. They will Zoom you. They will uplift you and support you. And if you are, older in your career and feel like you have knowledge to give and passion to impart, please consider being a mentor. It's absolutely incredible and rewarding. I had the opportunity to be a room monitor, which was monitoring the virtual chat room throughout the sessions. And so I just wanted to take a moment to really acknowledge that people who attended virtually, you mattered, and we really wanted to make sure that you felt as seen as you could be virtually. And so if you did attend virtually, thank you so much. Your comments, your questions, they were really, really meaningful and impactful to people who were in the room. And I'll say too, this was my first time presenting. And I was absolutely terrified and horrified, and the imposter syndrome came on very, very strong. But it is really, really heartening and wonderful to have people empowered in the room who helped out. And so if you are considering giving a talk, please do, because now that I'm a week out, I feel like I really contributed in a meaningful way to the conversation at APRA, and I'm hoping to do it in the future.
Thank you. And you certainly contributed to the conversation today as well. Thank you so much, Liz. Appreciate it. So let's see, Elaine.
Hello, Liz, were you our room monitor?
Probably.
Or maybe I just
I think she was.
Conference. I will pick up a few threads that are going through and just appreciated the mixing of being conscious of our humanity within the very technical, sometimes technology focused activities that we're doing. I feel like as we get further into that, we realize we really need to pick up some of those softer skills or human sides of ourselves and not go too far to the dark side. And I did just love seeing sort of a generational shift of newer, younger colleagues that did bring that different energy. I'll give Nicole a chance to share as well.
Yeah, Elaine and I presented together. It was our first time presenting. I had started in APRA in 2014, so it took me a good 10 years to feel brave enough to submit something to then share with, the rest of the group. But just that excitement of being in the same space, having those conversations with folks, either in your presentation or out on the street. I think I had some really amazing things just happen as I'm walking to and from the conference center with different folks. And then excitement to bring things back to your organization. There was a lot of texting and chatting and messages with team members who weren't able to attend of different things we wanted to try out. So that learning and excitement is great.
I can't thank you all enough for this. A couple of folks who were with us had to go, but I so deeply appreciate those of you who are here, those of you who were here before and had to leave, and all of you participating in conversation through the chat. It says a lot about APRA as an association. We love all the associations that help us advance philanthropy. APRA is a special one because it tends to be on the quiet side, but its impact is really significant. And if you want to share this and all these takeaways and maybe a little of the impact of APRA and why you should continue going to the APRA conferences, as some people have said so eloquently today and made arguments for, hopefully you can use this recording to advance that idea and advance support for and participation in this association. You'll find that there's a link coming to you through an email that's going to be coming to your email box in the next 48 hours. You can always look in your spam folder if you don't see it right away, and you'll find a recording of this is going to be also on YouTube in the coming days. Just a last note for myself before we all say goodbye. Many people have mentioned the imposter syndrome and about first-time speaking engagements. My first time speaking at a conference was APRA as a plenary address with a paper that I had written, and this was in 1990. And it was the first time I ever spoke publicly at anything, and the room was 500 people. And I read word for word what I delivered without slides. So my apologies to those who suffered through that. My thanks to APRA for giving me a chance to learn what it's like to stand in front of a crowd, and my deepest appreciation for all the colleagues here in our field. So with that, thanks again, and thanks to all of you. Join us on Thursday if you would. We'll see you next time. Take care.